We're going to start off with A Quiet Place. This is, of course, and I mean, correct me if I'm crazy wrong, but yeah, the third installment of A Quiet
Yep.
Place franchise. It's funny. I don't know about you. Like, I was thinking like, oh, what did I think of the previous two movies? And of course, I really enjoyed the first movie quite a bit, and I would still,
Hmm.
before getting to my thoughts on this film, when it came to the first two movies, I definitely enjoyed the first movie more. And I remember enjoying the second movie, I think, overall, but that's the thing. For some weird reason, I had a hard time remembering what happened in the second film. And it wasn't that long ago. And I don't know why. Like, then it made me go, well, maybe I didn't enjoy it that much. And that's why I don't remember it that well. I don't think that was so much the case. But anyway, those are my quick thoughts on the first two films. I don't know if you want to catch everyone up on where you stand with the franchise of A Quiet Place.
Yeah. For me, I've been in on it since the beginning, and I remember when I saw the first movie, I actually got to see it in an advanced screening during WonderCon that year
Oh,
that
okay.
the first one came out, and they had tickets to go see it at the theater nearby the convention center. And I think it was in downtown Disney, and it was such a great experience seeing it early after knowing kind of like the premise of the movie. So going with the crowd and everyone's super quiet in there, no one's chomping on popcorn. You could just hear a pin drop because the theater was so silent and on the edge of their seat. So it was a great experience just from that perspective alone. And then add into the fact that it was actually a good movie. It does suspense really well. It uses noise in a way that makes it heighten up your senses to ultra levels where you're really on edge. And so I just thought that one was just fantastic. It was John Krasinski's first movie that he directed as well. And so I think that was just like a nice opening calling card for him as a director, and he acted in it as well, and he did great in the movie too. So yeah, it was a nice start to the franchise. And then the second movie, I remember it well enough, I think, and I do recall liking it, maybe not quite as much as the first one, but still liking it. I like how they had the flashback in the beginning of the movie where John Krasinski's back in it, and it's that first day that everything kind of hits, and seeing what happens from that perspective for a little while before getting back into the present part of the story, right? And it picks up pretty much right after the first one, and they go on to the adventure, and then they meet Mr. Oppenheimer himself, and then
That's right.
it's like a whole bunch of stuff happens where there's like Jaimin Hansu is in the movie as well, who's reintroduced in this one in day one, and then also just this idea of them being able to find something of a safe haven in this island that these creatures can't go across water. So it's like, oh, this is a perfect place. And who knows if we'll get any more with those characters, but at least you kind of get the idea that they have a happy ending if you don't get to see anything more with them. So yeah, I liked the second movie. Not quite as much as the first, but definitely liked it for sure.
So this time around, John Krasinski is not directing.
No.
We have director Michael Sarnowski, I believe is how you say his last name, who directed this film. Who I best know him as the director of Pig, the
Mm-hmm.
film with Nicolas Cage that came out about I think 3 years ago. Actually, I think that movie made my top 10 that year, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I quite enjoyed that film. That's really, I think, the only thing in his catalog I've seen. He's got a relatively short catalog so far, but yeah, if that movie is any sign, I think very talented director. Starring in this movie though is mostly new cast except for one actor that you just mentioned. But yeah, it stars Lupita Nyong'o, Alex Wolff, Joseph Quinn, and then yeah, Jimon Hansu is in this film as well as he was in the part two of A Quiet Place. So, A Quiet Place Day One. What did you think?
They didn't do anything to reinvent the wheel, but I thought it was an entertaining movie in the series. I would say I'd probably put it somewhere near the second movie honestly. It still gave me the thrills that I'm looking for. I'd say that one of the things that maybe detracts from it is that there's not any kind of other things that you learn in regards to these creatures. And so there's that element. But honestly, I figured that's a lower element for me. So it's more just just barely crosses past a nitpick because it is like of a thought in terms of, okay, you would think that it would have a little bit more with those creatures where they came from sort of thing in this movie. But ultimately, I think that with the first one and the second one proved to me is that I like seeing the characters in the situation and see how they seem to be able to maneuver through these situations and be able to give us that tension throughout the film with these creatures knowing what they're capable of. So I think that that's what keeps me entertained with this series so far. And I would say this one goes right along those lines for me, where while it's not doing anything new, I still felt like coming out of the theater, I had a good time seeing it, and I would still want to see more of these movies in this series.
For me, I definitely would say this is my least favorite so far. I thought the movie was fine, but I didn't really love it. And in fact, I would say the more I've thought about this movie afterwards, I think the less I like it.
Hmm.
Because I would agree it doesn't do anything to reinvent the wheel, but at least I think, hoping for a certain level of like suspense and tension, maybe that we got in those first two movies, or at least from what I remember, especially in the first movie.
Hmm.
And it just wasn't there for me here. And I think there was also the issue, and I mean, again, we're talking spoilers, so I know I can say whatever, but there was just too many times that there were aspects of the, I guess, plot that was taking me out of it, and I was bumping against.
Do you
I mean,
recall anything in particular?
I'll say the cat almost in general is
Yeah,
one,
I
and
would
I
say
mean,
that's true. That's
this is kind of,
true.
and I would also argue that's also kind of a nitpicky thing, at least with the cat. But it was hard not to, and I hear me out, because I guess when it comes to our main character, Lupita Nyong'o, I kind of understand. I mean, this is a character who is diagnosed with cancer, is in hospice, as we see at the beginning of the film. So I could see the kind of attitude of, I just don't care. I love this cat and I don't give a shit.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
from her
Yeah.
perspective, I could almost I can buy into that. She's like, nope, this cat is important to me. I don't care if it really makes no sense to be carrying a cat around in a situation when you're not supposed to be making noise. And by the
Yeah.
way, this is the quietest cat I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I don't think it ever meows on screen
I don't
once.
think so. I don't think so.
So that's quite convenient. But
Yeah.
there's also other things like, I mean, when it comes to how, I guess, kind of quickly everyone seems to figure out that you shouldn't be making noise. In one sense, I'm like, well, the movie itself does a decent job, I think, for the audience of like portraying that quickly. Then I know there was that one scene where, Lupita's character it's all beginning, and she goes and sits down next to this car to kind of hide next to somebody else, and it's like a quiet moment, and there's another guy they see near them, but then once he makes a noise, then he's attacked, and that's like, I think, the one kind of evidence we're given to, like, hey, they could recognize that that was a reason this guy was attacked and they were not. But then I
Uh,
don't know, just, oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, there's definitely that, but I could have sworn, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there one other time when the military is flying in the choppers and they're saying over the loudspeaker that not to make noise and go
There
towards
is,
the okay.
yeah, I think a little later on
Yeah.
is one of those
Yeah,
moments. But
yeah,
even
it's a little
I
bit
think
later.
even before we get to that point, like, because soon after that, she wakes up like
In
in
that
the, like,
church place?
back in that marionette theater, right?
Oh, that's right. There's a theater.
And there's a lot of people in there that have
Yeah.
clearly all seemingly figured out that, hey, like we don't have to make, just be quiet and you'll be okay. And I don't know.
Hmm.
There was something about that, just the sheer number of people in that scene that I was like, wow, a lot of people seem to have already kind of figured this out and are surviving, and they're all in this big group in this little marionette theater. But
I
then
will
even
make an excuse for that, though.
okay,
A
what's
slight
that?
excuse. And by the way, this is just an excuse in terms of like trying to see it from the filmmaker's perspective.
Right,
Not that I'm saying that I particularly believe this excuse, but what I would go to say is that in anything that we've seen in fiction or even in real life, if there's something out to kill you, generally speaking, you're going to probably try and be as quiet as possible. Not necessarily that you know that it's affected by that, but you just don't want to make your
presence
whereabouts
known.
apparent to anything.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the only thing other than just the fact that it definitely seems like Jaimin Hansu's character already knows and has it figured out that it's specifically sound. Whereas maybe some other people there don't necessarily know that, but they're just trying to be quiet just for the sake of not, like you said, making their presence known.
Yeah, no, this is true. Um, but there was that. But then also, like, just after that, now I am not going to remember exactly the timeline of things of
Mm,
how soon we get that first like flyover where they're announcing, hey, just be quiet. But then I don't remember if it was the same time or if it was another time when they did the flyover, instructing people to go, I think, toward the one coast of the island,
hmm.
and just the sheer amount of people. And I get this is New
Right.
York City. There's a lot of people in New York City, as we know. But still, like the sheer amount of people that to this point were still surviving and then all deciding to walk in this huge
Mm,
caravan of people down the street, which is clearly a bad idea, as we saw in the movie.
yeah.
But I don't know. There was still something about that I'm like, this just doesn't seem kind of accurate to the world we've been given that this many people would have like actually made it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Given the
I hadn't even thought of
situation.
that. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean that's fair because I didn't really think about it other than the fact that at that point it seemed like the story necessitated an action set piece to where there's a lot of people going
Right.
in one direction, so they could have monsters attacking these throngs of people. So I only thought of it from the perspective of story more so than practicality in the sense of how many people would have actually survived within something like this to be able to then go and walk. Because then you would at least figure that if they kind of either figured it out on their own or heard the overhead announcement, that you probably wouldn't want to walk all together like that. And you would
Right.
want to maybe figure out some side streets to go to the direction you needed to go because of the fact that that many people together are going to make noise. It's just impossible not to. So that's where I sort of looked at it was like and kind of felt like it stretched my level of believability in what's going on. Just the fact that, well, why would these people all of a sudden be this stupid to just start traveling in packs together when
Right.
there's too many opportunities for somebody in that big crowd to make noise for some reason. So,
Right.
but yeah, I just didn't even think of it from the idea that there shouldn't be that many people in general left walking around.
I mean, that's what I immediately thought of when I was watching the movie. I mean, that was just my natural reaction to it.
Hmm.
I don't know, but it just seemed a little implausible to me. But
Hmm.
I don't know. Those are things I bumped up against, and for me, and then going back to the cat, right? Like, it's one thing to have her character again giving her situation being a little more like, nope, this is my cat. I don't
Hmm.
care because I'm gonna die anyway, I guess. And if I die because of these aliens, because of my cat, so be it. But then even the moment when Joseph Quinn's character who goes off to get her medicine and the cat like
Mm.
follows him, right? And then
Right. Yeah.
like the scene of the cat like going off into like what appears to be this almost like egg nest area, and he is
Mm.
like really trying to get to this cat. And I get that he obviously now cares about Lupita's character at this point and doesn't want her cat to like disappear. But I'm sorry, like given the situation of the alien
Yeah, there's no
invasion,
way.
I'm like, no, like I love cats.
No,
I'm an animal lover, but it's been a good run, cat. Like you decide
there's
to go
no
off
way.
on your own. Like that's your choice. I show back up and go, hey, I'm sorry, but your cat followed me and I can't find it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that one really bugged me. So
Yeah, that bugged me too. I did think that was quite silly. I just no way that I felt like I would have if I was him gone after that cat. But people do weird things, and that was definitely one of those things where I just shook my head and I was like, I don't get it. Although one thing within that scene that I found interesting was, like you said, they were at some sort of nesting area or something. I don't know
mhm.
exactly, but it was this one part of the scene where it looked like they were feeding on something from one of their pods or something. I don't know what
Yeah,
it was, and found that interesting because I've never seen them actually eating anything. It never looks like when they kill humans that they're killing them and eating them that I can recall anyway. So
I don't think we've seen that on camera anyway.
yeah, not that I've seen. So I found that kind of interesting and like, what does that mean? Because you don't just throw that in there for no reason. So what
Right.
is that stuff they're eating? Or is that their sustenance? Is there a way to like use that in some sort of way to starve them out? I don't know. So it was just kind of interesting. Is this planting a seed for something that will eventually talk to more of the larger mythology of this series and these creatures as a whole?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I didn't see. I didn't even really think about that as I was watching it, but
Hmm.
that's true. And I don't know what they're going for with that, but maybe we'll find
Yeah.
out in another installment. I don't know.
Yeah.
Was there a part of you that wished, like in one, one sense, like I kind of like that the movie didn't decide to just be a straight up like, well, this is a prequel that's going to explain what's going on kind of movie. Like it's
Hmm.
still obviously a movie that no, where this is a character story about, Lupita's character and the people she interacts with, and really it's just seems to be taking place during an alien invasion and how she kind of handles the situation.
Yeah.
Not so much about like why these aliens are here or what's a little more information about that. Did you wish there was more information presented here as to like what's going on with this invasion or not?
I wouldn't have mind if there had been a little bit more, just a little bit more, a taste of something.
Right.
It didn't bother me again. Like I said, it moved a little bit past nitpick because it does feel like we're 3 movies in. You think you would have something, but I think I remember this was sort of after the fact, and I had been thinking about it a little bit, and I was thinking back to something I recall seeing before this movie was made and maybe around the time it was announced, that there was something there about how they wouldn't get into the more of where these creatures came from in this movie.
Mm.
And so I think I recalled that this wasn't going to be the case in this movie, and that I don't know if within that it said anything about there will be a proper third movie that would explain more about that, or if that's just something that maybe John Krasinski and whoever else who had a hand in creating this story um, just felt like that was never an important part of telling this series and this story. Maybe they just always wanted it to be this human element to it, and that doesn't really need an explanation. That doesn't really matter. But I think that people who have watched these series since the first one have had that question of where did they come from, and
Right.
how did they get here, kind of thing. Because you just see these meteors hitting the Earth, and you just don't understand. Like, well, they're not spaceships, so how did that happen, kind of thing. So there's
Yeah.
that, and so
True.
maybe at this point the maybe at this point they might feel, and I could be wrong because I'm just conjecturing, but they might feel that any answer they give will be unsatisfactory at this point because people have built up so much in their heads about all these different things, and to even start to explore those things pulls away from what they want to do with it and just kind of to talk about the human condition and being able to survive this stuff, as opposed to becoming this straight out sci-fi kind of movie, as opposed to just this horror series that deals with aliens.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same page. Like, I'm in one sense, I wish there was a little more information, but I'm fine that this movie didn't just turn into a straight up like multi-perspective, like, you know, of an invasion and answers from the government as to what's happening. And I'm good that it was still a smaller kind of story set in a big crazy situation. But yeah, I don't know how they could have delivered a little more info, either through some type of news broadcast or something, but it's a little bit would have been nice, but it's also fine with me. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about the movie?
There was another scene in the movie that I remember. I'm trying to remember it now. I can't remember if it was a scene that I bumped up against or it wasn't one I bumped up against. It was one that I remember thinking about, and it was the part when they're all kind of up on the rooftop of one of the buildings and looking where right before the military comes in and destroys the bridge. I don't know which bridge that is in New York, but destroys the bridge. And so it's just kind of funny how, and I say funny, but it's not that kind of funny, but it's just like curiously ironic in the fact that the one character that they showed earlier in the movie that was having a little bit of trouble being quiet ends up stumbling his way upstairs on the rooftop and to see what's going on, and then he's like about ready to start talking again, and Djimon Hounsou's character takes him and, you know, basically kills him because he can't keep his mouth shut. And it's so funny, that part, to me, in a way, because the guy is about to say something and Djimon covers his mouth, and he's trying to get the guy to be quiet. It's like, dude, shut up. You know that if you make a sound, they're going to come and get us. Mm-hmm. And this guy, for whatever reason, he had to get that out. Like, he just had to say it again, because I forget what he said. It was like, we're all going to die or something like to that effect. He said it once, and then he just felt like he had to say it again, and then he says it again, and then that's when he kills him. It's just like, I just thought it was crazy just in that respect that, of course, this guy has to come and try to, you know, get basically everybody killed. But it was interesting in that his son was there as he was like kind of taking the life out of this guy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're like right when he kills him, they pan back to where his son was standing near the stairs or on the stairs, and you don't see him there anymore. So I don't know if he ducked away right prior to that or saw it and then, you know, left that. And so I was kind of curious in that sense of like, what is that, you know, how did that develop for their relationship? Even within the fact that I think when you see them in the second movie, it's just the two of them. I don't recall the mom being there. So I don't know what happened to her. If in this movie she died, or if some other way she just naturally died. Or they may have even talked about it in the second movie that maybe she died, you know, naturally after being on the island. Who knows? I can't remember. But I remember thinking at that time, I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to the mom. And they may have said in the second movie, I just don't recall because it's been so long. But yeah, it was kind of interesting for that perspective as well.
Yeah, I really need to rewatch the second movie, I think, soon. I want to rewatch it because, again, I remember enjoying it, but I'm like, Michelle had to give me certain details, and then I was like, it started coming back to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I do remember this and remember that about the second movie, but then a part of me is like, why is it that I have such a hard time remembering the details of that one? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I can't remember if that's, obviously I can't remember if that was covered in the second movie or not, so I'm curious. I'll have to check it back out again. Well, unless you have anything else to discuss about A Quiet Place, I think that's really all I had. I would say overall I enjoyed the movie, but I didn't love it, and I was kind of disappointed in it. That's still my overall take with this one.
Yeah, I would say overall I enjoyed it. I do feel like if I am comparing it to the first one, it loses a lot of quality and depth because of
Yeah.
the idea of trying to, even though it's still a smaller movie, it does try to go a little bit bigger in scope because you're in New York City, a very busy and loud city, and so it's
Hmm.
trying to make it from that aspect. But I think ultimately the reason why I still like this movie and in comparison to this one and the second one, or the first one and the second one, is because they do a good job of telling the human element within the story. And I thought Lupita Nyong'o did a great job in terms of how she was as a character and dealing with things. And even Joseph Quinn is this sort of kind of lost soul and didn't have anything or anywhere else to go and kind of clings to her while she's almost kind of shunning humanity just because she's on her last steps of life and doesn't really care that much and doesn't want to get close to anyone. But I like the way that they showed their relationship throughout this movie and how it, goes along. And of course there's the natural scares and stuff that come from the creatures. But I think that, yeah, that's just that the way that they tell the story and the way that they have these human elements is what still wins me over at the end of the day, I think.
Nice.